And those who are online, 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, and just reflect about these questions. Yeah? Okay, so I invite you back to the large group, and I myself, and I would assume also all others who are online now and who will be online later are curious what you talked about. I would invite you, maybe we could have a little sample of the congregations you have, or the churches. So who would just shortly maybe describe a little bit the identity of his or her church or congregation? Yeah, okay, here is the first one, thanks.
I live in a very small town, 1,600 people in the whole town. We are 8 churches, 8 active churches, 2 Mennonites, Roman Catholic, Lutheran, Anglican, you get the picture. But we all work together on many, many topics. We bring lots of refugees, we have the poor, that we have a food bank. We even do some services like Good Friday and stuff for the whole community. And that does make a difference to how we do church. We obviously have that problem though, that our young people move away and don't come back. So yes, we are an aging congregation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Who would like to continue?
So I am from Germany, Stuttgart. My church has 66 members, but on a Sunday morning, we are around about 15 to 25. Before the pandemic hit, there might have been 30-ish people for worship service on Sundays. We have 3 toddlers, but some of them are going to another church with their family because there are more families, because we don't have families. So yeah, that's a problem. We don't have any other children, no youth. So the youngest is 18 years old. There are 7 young adults. Then there am I as a pastor, and the others are older. So my church is also getting older, and I have the feeling we're also decreasing. Our numbers are decreasing. Yeah, people move away. Or just don't come on a regular basis for worship service. So that's a problem. And the elderly, they are getting older and older. They want to give away their responsibilities, but there are not so many young people who want to take over the responsibility. So we have tasks that need to be done, but no people who are willing to do them.
Okay, thank you. So seems the North Atlantic is no barrier regarding the problems of the churches. Okay, so maybe a different picture. Who wants to say something about his or her church? There was another. Yeah.
Well, I thought I would try to do a little summary of our group, but I'm having a hard time remembering everything we talked about. We had church from Canada, Switzerland, Kansas in the U.S., California in the U.S., and Indonesia. Okay, similar themes as to number of people, ages of people aging, but some with more younger people. And I thought there were similar themes of wanting to be a blessing in the community and different ways of reaching out into the community to be a blessing. Right, I think the Indonesian church context was different. We had some language barrier to get a full picture, but I wish to hear more because I think the Indonesian context is different than what the rest of us were talking about.
Yeah, thank you. I asked the Indonesian women, would anybody of you like to say something about her church one of you who is a bit better in English and could say something? Yo, there's one. Okay.
My private,
Yeah. Maybe could you remove the mask? Maybe because I think we could understand it better. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We are from Moria, Indonesia. Kristen Shak, we come from various regions, and we are under the auspice of the synod with the Mennonite sect, and our community is very concerned with the state of the congregation in the environment.
Mm-hmm. And how would you describe the identity? So is your church old, young? How old are the people in your church? Can you say a bit about this?
This come here woman,
Yeah.
200. Can
Yeah.
be a Mennonite,
Yeah.
MVC, yeah.
Yeah.
200 and
Okay, well, fine, thank you for that. Thanks. I was just curious, anybody who, but obviously the language is a bit a problem. So, okay, good. Thank you for the Indonesian example. Some more. Are there other churches maybe that don't have the problem of too many too old people, young people missing? More members than participants in the service.
I think Indonesian people is like the same, like other countries.
Hey, take the microphone, please, because we hear you, but
I'm just trying to translate from them. Okay?
there.
So I think it's the same. The problem is the same. We have many older people, like I think it's different from other country, but I think 60 or more. There is a majority for in our church. So and young people is missing. It's not just like they don't have any like care of the older people, not care of them, but they like to go another church who have some more facility, more like musical band or something like that. So maybe that's the difference from other country. Yes. So majority in GKMI, JITJ and JGKI, we have many older people in our church. Many. I don't know if another countries like ours, but the difference is our older people, like they saw each other, so like fellowship is so good. It's so good, but yeah, the problem is still the same. They getting older, and we don't have a new generation to become yes. And the young people, they go to another city, like organization. They go to take some education, their country, and some of them is don't like why our church is so old school, like why our church is so hard to understand, because the job for older people and young people, there is no bridge. Yeah, so that's the problem in Indonesia.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, because there are so many young people running around, and when we are in your synod on Monday evening, it was such a lively program and everything.
Yes,
so yeah.
Yes. You can see that, but in the reality, I'm sorry, but I must stop that, because I'm young, the youth leader from GKMI for like 2010 to 2016.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I know the specific problem, like yes, like that. So maybe in like even like this, they assembly like this, maybe you see they so powerful, they the spirit is, but in reality, and when they come back to their own church, the spirit is coming down again.
Really?
It's like,
Wow.
like okay, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
going to another church who have good music, good something that, yeah, that's a problem.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Thank you that we were allowed to look behind the curtain and behind the show. Yeah, yeah. Okay, very interesting. So obviously, many churches have the same problem, and we have to ask the question of renewal. But the problem is, how does renewal work? How can we do it, or how can we let it happen? Yeah. How can we be the creator and not only those who just swim and everything just runs? So I hope we have a little bit of time to think about it. I found one description about renewal. It's just from Wikipedia, and it says renewal can be a change through the replacement of principles or values, behaviors, protagonists, or structures. For example, in the form of a reform or revolution. That's the really large thing then. Or also personally by a rebirth. Sometimes a change is also aimed at by repetition in the sense of a return to former values or their revival, renaissance. Yeah, that's we all do. So reform, revolution, renaissance. So these are the three forms or rebirth, they say here in Wikipedia as a short description of renewal. And we all know different forms of renewal. Is it a question, Joe, or? No, okay. Oh, and we all know different forms of renewal. And I thought to take you, since I'm a historian, I always try to look into history and see what happened there. And when we look into Anabaptist history, we have the coming of Anabaptism in the 16th century, really as a strong movement. But then you see already in the second, third generation, everything becomes quite stabilized, especially in those regions where the persecution stopped and the churches were able to structure themselves and to establish themselves and to create church life. Everything becomes stable. You have structures, and then the question of renewal often starts. Especially, and then you often have some kind of these waves in history, yeah, that something starts and it gets a bit stable and structurized, and the hierarchies are being established, and often that's the time when it's over for women. Often in the first phase of a movement, it's possible for women to do everything. They preach, well, we don't know exactly if they're baptized, but they preach, they did mission work, and so on and so on. And then when the church becomes stable and institutionalized, then it's over for women. And often then in the next phase, when the next crisis starts, then women step in again. And when the crisis is over, then it's often over again, like First World War, Second World War. When the men were gone, the women had to do everything. And when the men were back, then it was over again for women. So that's only on the side. But there are often, some kind of phases of a reform, of a renewal, and one very strong episode or phase of renewal in the Anabaptist Mennonite history can be seen in the 18th century. And we can get this very, very good from the sources in the 18th century, where we have a lot of discussions among Mennonites, a lot of correspondence that give us insight into the social and spiritual atmosphere of the Mennonites at that time. And in these times, we find such interesting statements. For example, the elders are quite blind. They are incapable and without profound faith. The elders are examples of the spirit of the Antichrist. The elders are not the anointed of the Lord. The elders hunt the awakened like the partridges. So very different statements that show the complaints about the elders of the Mennonite congregations in Germany at that time. And it were very harsh statements. Those who critiqued or criticized the elders at that time were convinced these elders, they are no people of God. They have no faith at all. They are not on the right path of the faith. They don't preach very lively. They just have one Bible quotation after the other. So just quotations from the Bible and no lively preaching at that time. The complaints are going on. It is said so many souls are kept from the faith by the bad magisterium. So there is no the Lehramt. So the duty of the elders to teach their people, they don't do that. Yeah, they can't do it because they don't have the faith. So they can't preach the faith. So they can't give the faith to others. The elders the sermons are like let it be well to babble the word only as it is written. So they just babble. I'm not sure it's the right word in English, but it's just in German. So just schwätzen, yeah, just daherplaudern heißt es auf Deutsch. They just plaudern. So, and the elders, they would just talk the word of the God, but they wouldn't have it in their heart. Sermons that are only Bible quotations, as it is said here. Or Peter Verbeck from the 18th century, he made an interesting statement. He said, after I made my confession of faith, when he had to be baptized, or when he was baptized, this confession of faith, which I wrote up in great detail on 144 pages. So that was his confession of faith. This essay consisted of doctrinal sentences according to the system, without any interest of one's own heart. Of the truth, he shed his blood for me, poor little worm, there was nothing in it. So he just said, I just wrote my confession of faith according to the system, nothing from my heart, on 144 pages. So whatever he wrote there, I don't know, must have been awful. So just to continue, these complaints, also a very famous Mennonite from the Palatinate, Peter Weber, he also complained about the elders in his area, and he said, with the Mennonites, it's 10 times worse than everything. The children grow up in a great ignorance regarding the Mennonite faith teachings. Instruction is totally lacking, so no education of the young people. And the preachers, he said, those preachers that are chosen, they are only those who are as fit to preach as an ox to beat an organ. Yeah, so it's the translation is not so nice. It's always even nicer in German. It's die Ältesten, die können sich gerade nicht schicken wie ein Ochse zum Orgel schlagen. Es heißt, that's in German. Okay, so very clear lines. There are the elders, totally empty, no faith, just the system. And there are the critiques. There are the awakened people. They call themselves the awakened. And you see from the quotations already what's important for them. It's the spirit and the heart. It's these Herzensfrömmigkeit, as we say in German, the spirituality from the heart. And what's in it, renewal is definitely needed in these times. Yeah. So let's try to renew the system. One can ask, how did they want to revive? How did they want to renew the system? And they tried, or they were influenced and got their ideas of renewal by a movement from the Protestant church that you might all heard of. It's Pietism at this time. And I hope you don't have the impression or the notion of Pietism from the 19th century, because often in our circles, we always think of Pietism as just as the elders are described here, maybe. Yeah, so that's how we have in mind what Pietism is. But that's Pietism of the 19th century. The first one was already in the 17th century. Yeah. So there was a neo-Pietism. We say neo-Pietism in the 19th century, and that's very moralistic. No dancing, no drinking, no smoking, everything. But that was not Pietism in the beginning. And that was not the Pietism those who critique the elders here that were influenced by. This Pietism was also a renewal movement in the Protestant church. The Protestant church started in the 16th century in the Reformation, where we also started as Anabaptists. Then it also had a good start, and then it also came in a phase of very stable system. We say orthodoxy to that. It was the Lutheran orthodoxy in the 17th century when there was the rules were fixed. It was very stable. So there was also the idea what to do. And then there were a lot of people at that time, a lot of theologians who thought about the church and spirituality. But it was especially this man, and I'm sorry that this is not translated into English. It didn't work well with the slides, but I translated, so don't worry. His name was Philipp Jakob Spener. He lived from 1634 to 1705. And he is actually the one who influenced the early Pietism very much. His main writing was the Pia Desideria, 1675, where he thought about how shall our faith be. And he actually, it was also important or interesting about this early Pietism that many of these early Pietism thinkers went back to Anabaptism or had Anabaptism in mind when it started, and had Anabaptism as example of those who revived the system and revived the system also according to the notions they wanted to implement now into their church. So this Philipp Jakob Spener, he said, we need to strengthen our faith in our hearts, in our inner, in the inner. We need an edification of our churches. That's Gemeindeerbauung, what is written. That's an old word. Even the Germans don't understand it, maybe. It's Gemeindeerbauung, very old word. So an edification of the churches, to revive the churches. And how to revive the churches? He said, well, we can revive the churches with small, very small circles. This is the Collegia Pietatis. That's a Latin word, Collegia Pietatis. Very small circles in the churches where people come together, maybe 5, 6 people like you before, talking about the faith, talking about the Bible, praying together, singing together. And from these small nucleus, we can start that people start thinking again for themselves, not following a system, not following the sermon or the preacher or so, but starting to think for themselves, read again in the Bible for themselves and talk about it and find their way. And these Collegia Pietatis that Spener invented in his Pia Desideria also gave Pietism its name. So this is actually the basis for the name of Pietism. So these Collegia Pietatis, actually like the first Anabaptists, when they started in Switzerland, when they started everywhere, also these small groups, just from anew and just starting to talk about faith again. What's also interesting, and that's something that you can also see when these ideas of pietism came into Anabaptism, it was combined with an openness to other confessions, to other denominations. It was typical for pietism that they didn't separate themselves. That was different than the early Anabaptists. They didn't separate themselves, but they were open for other denominations, for believers in other denominations that also wanted to follow this path of pietism, if you want. Yeah. So there was an overarching spirituality that it was not of importance if you are a Catholic or if you Reformed person, a Lutheran, or even a Mennonite. If you join these thinking of how to live the faith and how to believe, then we are one. We are one in Christ. So that's very interesting, and this is really something that came into the Mennonites via pietism. Though another thing is also interesting, that these early pietists, like the Anabaptists, they had quite problems in their own church, because the Lutheran Church didn't see it very they didn't like it very much at the beginning, that there are these new groups that start thinking about the faith. So these pietists really were persecuted at the beginning. So that we have in German Pietistenstreit, so the pietism fight, these pietists, they were said they are sect. They are sect. Yo. But now, Daniel, please take the mic that the online people.
They were very individualist. The Pietists were they very individualist.
Individualist? Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, pietism was very. I mean, they had the idea was that they came together in these circles. I mean, this is some kind of communal idea. But then we also have pietist groups that they're very communal oriented. If you take the Herrnhuter, the Moravian Brethren in English, they had a very strong idea of community. Also, other pietists had strong ideas of community. Yeah, I know what your question means. Does pietism fit to Anabaptism? Because Anabaptism is community and pietism is individualism. I would not say that. I would not say that. Sure, I mean the pietism strengthened the individuum, because you shall find your way to faith. Yeah. But I mean, it was also, the community was very important. So I think the old thesis that pietism beschmutzte or so I don't think that. Yeah. Though pietism was very inhomogeneous or very diverse. Just that you see, we have Pietism Halle, that's August Hermann Franke with his orphanage and everything, the Herrnhuter. These are those who have the most contacts, the many contacts to the Mennonites at that time in the 18th century. And then we had radical pietism. There are a lot of communal ideas in radical pietism. Yeah. Okay, so now these pietism had a lot of influence into Anabaptism, and you can see it on the one hand on a lot of contexts that arose. There were a lot of Mennonites from Amsterdam, from Neuwied, from the Weierhof, this small village, Krefeld, Hamburg. So mainly from all northern East Frisia. Nearly in all Anabaptist communities and churches in the 18th century, you have people that have contact to people from pietism, mainly to the Herrnhuter. There's the very strong connection. And we know that Nikolaus von Zinzendorf, the founder of the Herrnhuter, he had contact to Johannes Decknagel, the Mennonite in Amsterdam. They had communion together. So they even had communion together. They had services together. So they exchanged letters very often. And there's a whole network of people that were influenced by pietism. So what was their ideas? And it's interesting, you see a lot of ideas that are typical for pietism, you also find in the letters, in the correspondence of the Mennonites at that time. And it's often, and it shows the link, is some kind of mysticism, yeah, too. You find this idea of unio mystica, that's an idea that already stems from the Middle Ages. This total immersion of oneself into God. Yeah, you find this in the Middle-aged mystics. That's quite interesting. Becoming one with God. The right losing, so the right giving oneself to God means that His will spirit wants to lose itself in the spirit of the silent, infinite eternity in the unfathomable lake. So it's in German, it means, dass man seinen Willensgeist in den Geist der stillen, unendlichen Ewigkeit verlieren möchte. As it's also a language that it's very difficult to translate. Yeah, it's a mystical language from the 18th century that is very difficult for us to translate. On the other hand, it is also a strong emphasis on the blood of Jesus Christ, and on the other hand, on one's own inadequacy. Yeah, okay. So to see I'm the sinner. Yeah, so I need God. So that's why there's a strong emphasis also on the blood of Jesus Christ. Yeah, we find such statements in the letters. One should seek one's salvation solely in the wounds of Jesus. Yeah, so and it's also typical for the language of the pietists to strengthen this blood. Yeah, this blood on the cross. I mean, that was the time. So, and it's just this sign that renewal was sought in that time over these typics. So the cross of Jesus Christ is in the focus. Yeah, we read in recent time, Mennonites have omitted the cross of Jesus Christ and turned the gospel into a moral. That's what the Awakened said. Yeah, so Mennonites and Anabaptism, that's just the moral, but not the lively thing, not really being united with God. And it is a language that we see that is very flowery, very blooming in German. Yeah, that's very typical. The sweet Jesus. That's already, we already found that in the Middle Ages, in the mystical text. Then over pietism, it enters Mennonite language in that time. In this sweet Jesus love, I greet you warmly. Yeah, as a greeting at the end. Okay, so this is what the notions of these awakened were in the 18th century in Mennonite circles. And it is really interesting that with this pietism, the influence was not only on these theological ideas, not only on the spirituality, but also what I mentioned before, that also the Mennonites now opened themselves for other denominations. So now it was over. We are the separated people. We are not the separated people because we have believers, fellow believers in all other denominations. So we can't speak of ecumenical movement at that time yet because it was not there, but it was some kind of a forerunner of the ecumenical movement. And on the other hand, it also influenced the Mennonites in the longing for education, because pietism was also connected with education, because the best thing that people start to think for themselves, that they read the Bible, that they can express themselves and so on, is education. And also to broaden their perspective, to read other things, yeah, to get one's own position to something. So, and this also came now into the Mennonite in the Mennonite scene, this openness for other and the longing for education. You see it then when times changes a bit and you get into the 19th century, you see that I add that then. Then you see it then in the 19th century that it really goes over in another renewal movement that takes aspects and elements from these renewal movement from the 18th century. And now in the 19th century, it's again these, we see this openness for others very clearly, because at the beginning of the 19th century, Mennonites start to participate in missionary and Bible societies. First, they gave their money to Baptist mission societies, and then it were the Dutch people that started their own mission society, and this is connected with the place and with the region we are here, because they say the Baptists, they don't care for those regions where we as Dutch Mennonites have our colonies. So, and this was here, Indonesia was a Dutch colony. So the Dutch people started then, the Dutch Doopsgezinde then started their own mission society that was, that established the mission stations here in Java and in Sumatra. So that was actually in the 19th century. And then you have this stress for education, that the preachers, but also the lay people shall have a better education. And then you have the movement in Germany that the Mennonite ministers are educated and are paid. So they are better trained. What I forgot before was another thing that's also very interesting. Always, it's a bit like Pietism experienced it, that also the awakened, they called themselves awakened. Those who were awakened in the Mennonite circles, they got a lot of critiques from the elders too, because you read at the beginning all the accusations against the elders. And then the elders said, well, stop it. Yeah, stop it. We can't take it, what you say. And so this desire for renewal reaches limit within the own Mennonite communities. It was perceived as being too independent, too new, especially the assemblies or the gatherings that the awakened had. And also their independent celebrations of the Lord's Supper and this independent preaching in various congregations, that was viewed very critically. To such extent that these awakened were forbidden to preach. They were excluded from the celebration of Lord's Supper in the Mennonite communities. And so were excluded from various gatherings of the church. But one has to say, on the other hand, it was also some kind of conflict with the stately privileges the Mennonites had. So that was some kind, that it could have been that these separated gatherings of the awakened, that they could have been seen as doing mission work or being against the state rules. So that was also quite a conflict. Maybe also one explanation why the elders were so strict against the renewal movement. But on the other hand, I mean, you see where the lines were. Okay, so that was actually the some kind of two renewal movements that some kind of tend into each other in the 18th and 19th century in the Mennonite churches that I wanted to present you. And I would like to get with you now a bit more into discussing, or maybe we can try to reflect about that a bit together. If we heard, we have different problems today. We heard of old churches, obviously also in Indonesia. We heard of well, the youth is lacking. We heard of declining churches, and obviously, what shall we do, or what can we do? So I would be interested, are there some comments or maybe questions that go back to that, what I was talking about, reflections on that? What comes to your mind when you hear that from history and you think of our times now? Maybe also our young people here that are obviously not those who are lacking in the church. What comes to your mind? Yep, I give you the microphone.
No, it's good. No, I'd also like to say, I'm from Winnipeg in Canada, and I'm here representing one church, but I also often go to another church that is right across the park from my house. And there are quite a few young people in that church. It's very central in Winnipeg. And the young people are very involved in, and with me, she's also my roommate, so she's the same church across the park. They're very engaged in political church activism, and there are lots of young people that are part of that. They go to protests together, they gather together and discuss things that are happening in our society. And there isn't so much, I would say, in the other church that I am actually representing here. There are only 4 of us young people there. And what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought.
Maybe the church is just the renewed church and you
Right.
leave your old one, or?
Yeah, and that there is this sense that, I guess what I'm thinking of is that the young people were very engaged and pushing back and saying, this is what we want to do. But in many spaces, it seems like the young people are just gone and they're not engaged in any way. So the criticism isn't even, the way you're engaging is wrong. It's just, where are you?
Mm-hmm.
And are you at all engaged? And then in this other place where there are young people, there's quite a lot of engagement. And it's around things that haven't been viewed as part of the church, I think, in a while, like political and social change. Maybe, I don't know. I'm rambling.
Yeah. So you think that's, or you want, was that, you want to say something? No. Yeah, okay. Because the question is also, why are the young people not there? Yeah, that's.
I may be just the host, but the topic is.
You can also talk
Yes.
as host.
Okay. I think maybe in Indonesia. So I remember the verse from Matthew 28, verse 19 to 20.
Hey, I have to just say, would you remove your mask maybe? Because then we could understand you much better. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So I just remember Matthew 28, verse 19 to 20. Okay. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations and baptize them in the name of Father, of Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teach them. Yeah, and so I think the problem is for young people in church, they not yet become disciples from God, from Jesus, from teaching of the Bible. So I think some young people they like, because it's our nature, from we are kids or from very little. It's our nature to find God. Okay, it's our nature. So, but once they come to church, and they become like into a system. So yes, they do everything for church, right? I think my friends from Canada, yes, there is so many activists in there, yes, the young people, they want to do anything because they know it's like make God happy, okay? But the problem is they don't learn anything about God. So the problem is I think they not really know what the Bible says or God says. They don't know that, but they just want to serve. They just want to come to church, being part of communities, right? Yeah, just like that, I think. But the older people doesn't know that the core. Yes, the Bible, about the love of God. They doesn't know that. The older people just know, oh, there is many young people here, so maybe they can do something. Okay, maybe I can teach them to like, oh, go to society and do something there, do something good, do something like God says. The problem is they don't know what God says, what the Bible says. They don't really know. They don't not learn deep about that. So I think that's some kind of reflection from this like you say like that freedom from young people. So they it's a nature, our nature to find God, to be to like assemble like this, assemble like this. This is our nature. But the problem is like maybe I am part of my church and I become a song I'm a rocker like metal. I like the metal music and so everything like that. So but God called me, hey, you must serve in this church. So what else, God? What should I do? Learn the Bible first. Learn everything about that. How I can learn this Bible? So there's like so many inside it I don't understand. So I need a bridge. Yeah. So I find like my like senior or I don't know we call in English like older people who want to teach me not just the system of Bible of the church, but the love of God that you are being saved by God, by His blood and so on and yes, like that. I think that's the problem in my church in Indonesia. So young people. So I said before that. Yes, maybe we saw powerful. We saw when the music come, like we want to dancing. We want to this even so many young people. You can see when we go to STT, you know, like there's young people in there. But they don't know nothing about the Bible and so the love of God and anything. So once they make something wrong, like cigarette or like free sex or something, they feel like I'm judged. So I'm not going to church. Yeah.
Okay.
I will go outside there. I find a new community to where they will accept them. Yes.
Okay, so you just said the same like the awakened in the 18th century.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Other statements? Yeah, well, I give you his, then I keep mine and can interfere if it's necessary. Oh, it's.
Maybe we have a little bit of a difference in cultures and countries and so on. I live in a different province as Claudia, but it's the same country. And I would say that I think that our young people that are raised in the church by Christian families, they do very much have very strong knowledge of Bible stories and the Bible, and that God loves them no matter what. That's not the issue. I can't tell you exactly why my children would rather go to Forest Church than come to my church. But it's definitely not that they don't understand. And I think that in Canada, we even, I mean, my generation had Bible stories in school. Everybody got them, whether they like it or not. So, but even their generation, which is the same as my kids, I think they had a very solid understanding of Bible and of the love of God and their salvation. But they still somehow decided it wasn't important. And that's where I don't understand where we go from there.
Okay, thank you. So any other reflections about that? I mean, we can ask, is there the necessity to do things different, to change things? Yeah, well, I mean, there are a few examples, yeah, but I mean, sometimes, yeah, you can change the system and come into the new system, or I mean, often it's also difficult to just copy, yeah. So I think sometimes we also have to think for ourselves, where are we and what shall we do different, yeah. Not copy other things, but maybe take good things and so on, yeah. So some more reflection from you. What?
So I missed something you said at the very beginning of your presentation. And for a whole while, I thought you were talking about today. And so then it caught me by surprise when you said, oh, that's 17th century. Oh, that feels so familiar. So that I kept that in mind the whole time, thinking, you said it at the beginning that it goes by cycles. And I've been thinking of so many of those critiques of elders. I've been hearing them in my church recently. So that's not quite as bad, but the same kind of saying, oh, you know, they don't have the spirit and they just that. So, but now I'm just left thinking, what is there anything we can do to, I don't know, renewal by consensus rather than revolution? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's not that easy, and that's a problem. It's a problem. It's not so easy just to say what can we do, and I think it's not this just now and this it happens. Yeah, I think we see a lot of symptoms that things don't work well because that you go to a different church, your children go to a different church. So I think there, and it's obviously it's North America as well as in Europe as well as in Indonesia. So obviously we all in some kind of phase where we have to think, what are we as Mennonites? Yeah, and I always believe it's important that we think, who are we as Mennonites? Not that we just say we are some kind of Christian or so on. We are Mennonites, and I think it's a process that has to be started. Maybe that started already because we all see what's not working, and it's often not an easy answer. Yeah, we can say, well, we have forced services, but I mean that's just one way out, or that's also not the solution. Yeah, and it's and I don't have the answer either. It's more the thing to get everybody into reflection. Yeah, we often tend to just complain and then say, well, the youth is gone and they don't come. I don't know why they don't come, and so the elders are too inflexible or whatever, and so it's the instructions are missing. So obviously, yeah, what he says, and then we are somehow disappointed and we just sit back and look how the wagon is going more and more into deep water or so. But I think we have to start. Who are we again? Or who are we as Mennonites, and what is missing? Maybe we do things now for too long time the same. And I'm also convinced it also doesn't help if we change the music. Yeah, that it also doesn't help, because sometimes denominations think, oh, if we just have a band and if we get rid of the organ or so, everything would change. I think that's not the answer. This is maybe one part of the answer. And I think we really have to start thinking about it. And the workshop was not designed to give the answers how to revive the Mennonite system in the year 2022. Yeah. But I found it very interesting that obviously many churches have the same problems, and so also the youth who is here. Yeah. Maybe sometimes I also think churches have to, maybe it's over for some churches, then there are new churches starting somewhere, new places, yeah? Maybe very traditional ones will not be there anymore, but maybe new churches start. Here are two of our brothers from South Korea who really started a Mennonite community, not because they were traditionally Mennonite, but because you started reading Mennonite books on history and theology and started something new in South Korea. Yeah, so that's also interesting. I mean, that's also interesting news story. What intrigued you, or what made you interested in this? What is for us totally normal? Yeah, that's also often the problem. Yeah, that it's so normal that is just, we're just going with the flow. Yeah. So that was a bit the aim of this workshop, and I mean we should continue once a month or so, just some kind of like the first Anabaptists did around Zwingli, just with this Gelehrtenschule, just coming together and talking about it. I think that also helps first to name the problems, and also sometimes to be brave enough to name the problems, because sometimes we're a bit ashamed and say, well, it's not so good, but to name the problems and then to see how it can go on. Yeah. Hey, Joe, the last words for you. You from your South Korean background.
Right. So since I'm called on, I'll share a bit of our story in South Korea. So I have two thoughts that kind of came up. One is we're a very, very, very small church in Korea, because I've heard a lot of people say, oh, we're a small church, we only have 2,000 people. And we have 35 members in our entire congregation, like in our entire conference. So Mennonite Church South Korea has 35 members. We have 4 churches. Our church, we have 7 members, about 10 people come to worship. And when my wife and I joined this church 3 years ago, we experienced a 20% increase in the worshiping members. And when we signed on to become a Mennonite member of the church, that means we partake in the responsibilities and decision making in the church. Last year, the membership increased by 30%. So now we have 7 members. So I'm saying this as partly as a joke and partly to illustrate the point that beginning anew, so beginning something in itself has energy. And when you have 100 members in the church and you see you're declining, when one person comes, it's a 1% increase and it doesn't feel big. And the person who comes in may not feel very special about being there, but just having the sheer fact of having a very small group and a beginning group just in itself has that energy there. So when my wife and I joined the church, a lot of it had to do with the fact that, we knew the church wasn't perfect. We knew, a lot of things that we were looking for weren't there. But because it was such a small church and we saw, things that we could do there and, the value of, that we can practice our faith was alluring to us, I think, looking back. So that's why maybe the Pietists, broke things up in the 18th century. So I think there's one aspect of that. And second thing that came to my mind was, I think for the young people, so I'm in my 30s, so like somewhat young, I guess. I'm in between, you know what I mean. So the things I've experienced in my 20s, so somewhat recent, and from what I hear, so we have a very even, spread in our church. So we have like 2 20s and 2 30s and, one person in their 40s, and so we have a good spread of 7 members. And from what I hear from my the members in their 20s, and the feeling I get when we have these conversations is young people need a flag to wave, so to say. So what I mean is they need a cause. They want to do something and they want to make a difference, be it political, advocacy, or be it social service or doing certain service for the church. But I think what the young people needs is, that, sense of urgency and sense of, making a difference that is really essential for them, and making some kind of sacrifice, be it time or be it, some kind of economic, sacrifice, but, making that sacrifice for something bigger than ourselves. And I think how the church can provide that, could be different with different contexts. But I think the church needs to be more than just, a nice, cozy, warm place that talks about the right things. There has to be an essence there that is, in itself very visibly, that you have, it's something that you have to pay the price. So for me, my journey to becoming a Mennonite was, my wife and I had the privilege to visit different communities in North America, and a lot of them had like Anabaptist backgrounds. Not many Mennonite communities we could go to, I'm sorry to say. But so like Hutterites, we lived 6 months in the Hutterites. We spent like 3 months in a place called Jubilee Partners in the USA. They are a community that lives with refugees. And these experiences, when we were there, it's very visible. We see what's happening, and why. Clearly why they're living in community. They have a purpose, and that led us to think, because we've been Christians all our lives, but seeing those things made us feel like, what we're doing here, it may not have much substance of Christian faith. Yes, we're confessing Christians, we're active members of the church, but what is the substance of our faith is not very clear. So I think the church has to make that very visible to young people, what they're getting into, and give them a flag to wave. So yeah, that's something I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think that was a nice statement at the end, and we are already over time. So, and some of you might want to join the next workshops in 20 minutes. I thank you all. And though we didn't review everything today, what was not the purpose actually of the workshop, could not be the purpose. I hope maybe you have some new thoughts or ideas, or maybe it just start thinking, start reflecting, and not go with the flow, but start going against the mainstream again, as the first Anabaptists did, and do that with maturity and with strength, and just go and try sometimes. And even if it doesn't work, try again. Okay, so thank you for your attention, also online. I say goodbye and enjoy the next workshop.